In the last video, we used polynomial regression to discover that in this politics data set, we had a nonlinear trend between political knowledge and news consumption, with news consumption being the regressor, as we can see here, and political knowledge being the outcome variable. And we had included this squared or quadratic term, and that improved the fit. In this video, I'm going to introduce to you the ggplot2 package, and this is something that we haven't covered before, but it really is a very popular package for doing graphics of all sorts in R. So we're going to go ahead and install it if you haven't already installed it, and then we will load it here. Oh, sorry, it's ggplot2. Okay, there we go. Strange that there's no ggplot when there's a ggplot2, but what are you going to do? Okay, so first we're going to look at a scatter plot with a linear regression line. So before we get into getting a nonlinear regression line, which is what we're really interested in this particular instance, we're going to see how we can get a scatter plot with a linear regression line. And we've done this before with other options, but the plot function and the scatter plot function. But I'm going to show this to you in ggplot since we're going to then build off it. And ggplot is the most flexible, most powerful graphics set of tools in R. So it's good to get a little practice with them. So the function itself is just called ggplot, no 2. And we start off by indicating the data set, and then we have something that always comes right after that called AES, and this stands for aesthetic. And here's where we put, as you can see in the yellow box, our X and Y variable. So our X variable is political, our X variable actually is news. And you might be wondering whether we should choose the centered version because we needed that for the regression, but we don't need it for graphing. The centered version was used in the regression itself to protect against collinearity. But when we're graphing, that's not a problem. We don't need to worry about it. So we're just going to use news. And this also makes sense because we would probably want our graph to be on the original scale of news, not the centered version where the midpoint is 0. And then we have our Y variable, which is political knowledge. Now, if I run this just as is, it's going to create a graph because we've told R that we want a graph with news on the x-axis and political knowledge on the y-axis. But there's nothing of interest here. It's just empty. All we've got is this gray grid line, and that's actually something I'm going to show you how to get rid of that later, because most of the time it makes things look a little busy. So in ggplot, as we're adding pieces to the graph, we are going to add new lines, and each line, except for the last, will end with a plus sign. And then if you're using a script, you'll see that it automatically indents the next line a couple spaces, which helps keep things a little bit clean and easier to keep track of things. Now, most of the elements that we're going to add are going to start with geom for geometric. And we're going to use point. Geom point basically just says take the data points between these two variables and drop them in here as dots, and that's exactly what a scatter plot is, right? So if that's all we did, then we get a scatter plot. It's a nice looking scatter plot, but we're looking to add the regression line. So we're going to add yet another element, which is the line itself. For this, we're going to use geom_smooth. And we have to tell R what way in which we want to draw the line. So we want to use a linear model. We actually have to put this in quotes. And this is going to basically, under the hood, it's going to run a simple linear regression predicting political knowledge from news. Show you what that looks like. So we get nice regression line here, but you can see we also have this confidence interval band that's based on standard error, And if that's what you want, that's great. For the purposes of this class, we're not going to really get into these sorts of bands, so we're going to get rid of it. The way that we get rid of it is we say SE equals false. Rerun it, and it is gone. Okay, so that's the linear regression line. Now we want to update the plot to include a nonlinear regression line based on our polynomial regression that we did. So I'm going to just copy and paste this because it's mostly the same, but we're going to add in a formula, so we're going to force R to use a particular formula. And the formula is basically going to be the one that we used here. Y as a function of x plus the squared version of x. And in fact, when we're adding this in, maybe slightly surprisingly, we're not going to use news and p knowledge. By this point, ggplot knows that news is the x variable, p knowledge is the y variable. So we are going to just say y as a function of x plus the squared version of x. And that should do it. Yay! So this is kind of exciting. Now we have a curvilinear line that is coming from our exact regression when we had, not with the covariates, but just with the x plus x squared. And so that's a better fit. We know it's a better fit from the previous video. Just a few small things that I want to show you how to do anytime you're using ggplot. One is to improve the x and y labels so that they're more descriptive and capitalized and more professional. And then the second thing is to get rid of this gray background. You don't have to, but most of the time, as I said, it looks a little busy. So to relabel the x-axis, we use xlab. And and then in parentheses and quotes, we just put whatever we want the x label to be. I'm going to just say average days of news consumption. We also want to change the y label, so we'll just call this political knowledge. And then the last thing we'll do is change the theme, which is going to change like how the background looks. So as I start typing theme underscore, you'll see that there's a variety of different choices here. But classic is the way to go if you just want to get rid of that gray background and not replace it with anything else. Let's see how all these changes look. Very nice scatterplot here. Still have the nonlinear regression line. Now we have professional and clear x and y axis labels and no distracting gray background.